Jordan Peterson just released an episode with his friend Michael Shellenberger discussing the topic of kids changing their gender and allowing that, and also the medicine that stops them from going through puberty. I don't want to use the actual trendy terms in case for some reason the algorithm catches it and for whatever reason would stop this video from getting out. But this conversation took a really interesting turn towards the about maybe 3/4, closer to the end of the conversation, towards God, actually, when Shellenberger was asking Jordan Peterson if he can think of any secular ways to combat this topic, or these ideologies that allow kids to have this medicine that ultimately is not healthy for them. And so we're going to analyze some of this conversation, and we're going to be watching a good chunk of it. I'll be pausing it through and through just to give some commentary and whatnot. But yeah, so we're going to start at the 1 hour and 14-minute mark. Let's see.
So it seems like, if I agree with your assessment. So what do you think then, how would you describe the way forward? It seems like you have to find some secular way to affirm that everybody's born into the right body, that there's...
So secular, for if you didn't know, means without God, right? So music that is secular would be music that's not about God. The secular worldview is a worldview that is not pertaining to God. So that's what he's asking, right? So he's saying, how do we create good arguments from a secular worldview that promote life and the right to go through puberty and all that? Like, how do we combat this, giving children this medicine from their worldview, right? Because they're coming from a secular worldview. So how do we come from their same worldview?
Biological differences, that everybody has the right to puberty, that nobody shall be denied the right to puberty. But I think you're right. The nihilism, until we address it with some life-affirming, pro-human vision. And I know I'm a person of faith, you're a person of faith, but I recognize also I'm in a secular society. So, I mean, how do you answer the question of, how do you make this case for a pro-human, life-affirming vision in a society that's so secular?
Michael,
and so
I don't think there is a secular reform.
Okay.
Okay, so he just said he doesn't think there's a secular reform. And did you notice that when Michael said, I'm a person of faith, you're a person of faith, Jordan Peterson didn't respond in a negative way. It's been this idea of, is Jordan Peterson a Christian, is something that we've been talking about in the Christian sphere for quite a while. We've seen him cry talking about what it would mean to follow Jesus. We've heard him on the that British news guy's show saying, are you a Christian? And he says, well, look at their fruits is what I say to you, because it's a personal question. And then he got asked recently, and he described Christianity kind of in his own way and said, I think that's right. And so it does seem that Jordan Peterson is becoming more transparent maybe with where he is with Jesus. There's still some questions I have for Jordan Peterson's journey that we'll get into as we continue to watch this. But I just wanted to stop there and take notice that he got called a person of faith and didn't deny it. And then he said, there is no secular answer to combat these ideas. So what does that mean? That means that the only thing that he's thinking about, and we'll see this in a little bit, is that you have to have you can't have a secular argument for why these medicines are bad, because nihilism, secular worldview, nothing's grounded, nothing matters. So let's keep it listening to what he has to say.
I think we're at the end of the Enlightenment.
Mm-hmm.
I think the secular experiment has collapsed. I think it's collapsed because it's technically wrong. The book I've just published, or will publish in November, the one I'm touring about, the book is We Who Wrestle with God. And I make an elaborate case for this. I think the evidence now, this is the scientific evidence, by the way, the evidence is overwhelming that we see the world through a structure of value. And the description of the structure of value of a person is a story. That's what a story is. So when you go to a movie and you watch someone characterized, what you're seeing is the embodiment of their value structure. And you want to see that because you need a value structure to orient yourself in the world. That's what makes you pay attention to one thing rather than another, because attention itself is value predicated. And the monotheistic hypothesis is that all values unify at the pinnacle and that people should orient themselves towards that. And I think there's every reason to assume that that's exactly right. I also think it's irreplaceable.
What do you say?
Okay. So, did you guys catch that? Jordan Peterson said the monotheistic hypothesis is that all values unify at the pinnacle and people should orient themselves to that. And he says that there's every reason to assume that's right and nothing else, right? So that's really interesting. So, at the very least, he just said you have to have a worldview that says there's one God. That is at the very bottom, at the very least, a monotheistic, a one God, i.e., Christianity, Islam, and Judaism are the one God religions, is right. And why is it right? It's because you have a higher structure. You have God Almighty saying this is how to live your life, and you orient yourself in a way that is directed at following the commands of God, and that He says that's the only way to orient your life. And He says that there's every reason to assume that's right. Now, I love this because, as Christians, we believe that God's commands are for the flourishing of humanity, that God loves us so much that He wants us to do well. He wants us to have a fun, He wants us to have an enjoyable, He wants us to have a peaceful life. And so if every human followed the commands of Christ, we would see that, there's all the commands in God lead to human flourishing, right? And so this is awesome. I love to see it. So yeah, hopefully Jordan Peterson makes it a clear statement for the future that he is specifically a follower of Jesus, right?
And so I guess one question is whether, because I've been playing with this idea that really where we can build a political majority to prevent these atrocities from continuing is around the idea of civilization. But I think what you're saying is that that's not good enough, that the civilization has to be in service of something even larger than the.
Okay, so basically he's saying, again, back to the secular argument, how do we give people a secular reason to abandon medicines that affect people's hormones and stop people from going through puberty in order to help them change their genders, right? And so he's trying to build this worldview of like, okay, you got to think of the greater civilization. You're part of something bigger than yourself. Everyone has the right to puberty and stuff. And Jordan Peterson is saying, no, you need something greater than that. Civilization alone is not going to end or give reason to stopping these things.
Civilization itself.
Look, here's the problem with the perspective that Pinker and Shermer might adopt. So let's say family.
Pinker and Shermer are, I believe, they're atheist friends, and Michael right before this was saying like, oh, if I could get in their mind, they might say this, and so they're talking about how an atheist might approach this conversation. So Jordan is about to say something like, you get truth, family, justice, and whatnot. From like an atheist perspective, there's these characteristics, these attributes that you can aim towards. But honestly, on the side note, it's in atheism, why orient yourself towards any higher virtues? Because those higher virtues are just subjective to your decision. So anyways, we'll get back to this.
Family, justice, truth, beauty. Okay, why?
Larger than the civilization itself.
Look, here's the problem with the perspective that Pinker and Shermer might adopt. So let's say family, justice, truth, beauty. Okay, why? Why those? Well, because they all share something. They all share something good. They all partake in the good. Okay, this is a definition. The good they partake in is God. It's a definition.
Okay, so he's saying atheists might align themselves with, at least this is what I'm getting. If I'm missing something, let me know. Sometimes you know how Jordan Peterson talks, you get confused, and you're like, I had to rewatch it like 5 times to see what he's saying. But what I can gather is that he's saying atheists might orient themselves towards caring for family, caring for justice, caring for unity, and caring for truth, which is, the truth part's ironic. But what Jordan Peterson is saying is, okay, what they're looking for is the good in all of those, but the total good of what they're actually looking for is God. That because God exists, He is the goodness that is in everything. Wherever there's goodness, there's God. So the atheist might want these attributes, but these attributes are actually pointing towards God themselves. So you can't just say, I'm going to live for my family and care for my family, because what you're actually saying is, okay, well, where do you get that care for your family? What value system are you basing that off of? And the reason that intuitively we care for family and want to protect family and love family and provide for family is because God exists and it put that in us, right? God created humanity and put humanity in a family and gave roles to different people in the families to provide and protect and care for the family. So, you want unity amongst your maybe your country, your neighborhood. Why do you want unity? You want to live in harmony, right? But where does harmony come from? It comes from the commands of Jesus to love your neighbor and do good to them, right? So really interesting.
It's not the summum bonum exactly. It's a slightly different twist on that. It's that the ultimate unity of the spirit that is good is the good that makes itself manifest in all good things.
So that's the part I had to rewatch a bunch of times. I'm gonna pull it back again because he just Jordan Peterson's kind of like, when Peter says in, I think, 1st or 2nd Peter, he talks about Paul's writing and he says sometimes they're hard to understand because he's confusing. Sometimes how I feel with Jordan Peterson.
The good they partake in is God. It's a definition. So it's not the summum bonum exactly. It's a slightly different twist on that. It's that the ultimate unity of the spirit that is good is the good that makes itself manifest in all good things. Right. And you see, that's a different way of conception. Now, Pinker and Shermer might say, well, that's not a spirit and you can't have a relationship with it, right? Because that would
be the atheist argument, right? To say, okay, God is the spirit of goodness that inhabits everything that is good. Christians say we can interact with that spirit. We can have a personal relationship with that spirit, and the spirit of goodness that is God can be inside of us. And he's saying, well, the atheist would say you can't have that. That's just good morals and you can't have a relationship with it.
Be the next object. Okay, there's a higher good, but it's impersonal and you can't have a relationship with it. I would say, I think that's a demolishable argument too, because the fundamental mode of human apprehension is relationship. Like at the highest
Look at Jordan Peterson get into some apologetics. We love to see it. Oh my gosh. Okay, so he said he thinks that's a demolishable argument because at the core of human interaction is relationship, right? So you can't say that the goodness that you want to partake in is not personable because relationship is the core of humanity. It's what we're all existing on, right? So let's listen back again, just exactly what he said.
Argument too, because the fundamental mode of human apprehension is relationship. Like at the highest level of being, we're a personality. We exist in relationship.
Okay, so at the highest level of being, we exist in relationship with each other, which is true, right? And so you can't say that this goodness that you're theorizing about isn't personable because humans exist in personal relationships.
So now you might say just because there's human beings doesn't mean there's a spirit with whom we can establish a relationship. And the first thing I would say is that's not absolutely crystal clear. So, don't get the cart ahead of the...
So an atheist might say, well, just because that person is good doesn't mean there's any spirit involved in there. And he's saying, well, we don't know. He's like, you can't just rule out the reality of a spirit, which I agree with, obviously.
Of course. But I also think you can make a very credible case that the proper way of conceptualizing the manner in which we do and should interact with the highest good is in covenantal relationship. I think that's how...
What? You guys get that? Now, this is how you know he's been reading his Bible. And we all know he's been reading his Bible. He has the Genesis and Exodus lectures, and he's talking about we who wrestle with God, and he talks about the story of Abraham all the time and this stuff. But, man, okay, so he said the highest level, the best way to interact with the highest good is in covenantal relationship, right?
Do and should interact with the highest good is in covenantal relationship. I think that's how people...
Okay, yeah. So we should interact with the highest good in covenantal relationship. This is what it means to be a Christian, to have a covenant with God. That is like, oh my gosh, he's just preaching the gospel, right? And he's like the best way humans can live this life is to have a covenantal relationship with the highest good. Who's the highest good? God. What does a covenant with God means? It means to believe the gospel, to confess your sins before God and ask for forgiveness of sin, believe in Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, and live out his commands. Whoo, that's some good stuff.
Do it. I mean, so, and I think that's the defining characteristic of the relationship between man and the transcendent. And so I'll give you an example of that.
Which is true. He said that's the fundamental characteristic of what it means to have a relationship with the transcendent, being Jesus. That's absolutely true. Just
a quick example. So, Pinker works. Well,
okay, so he's going to get into a little bit more, but that's basically all what I wanted to stop at. Is that is so amazing, guys, that Jordan Peterson is kind of doing apologetics about why an atheist worldview is not actually the greatest, and he's talking about the monotheistic hypothesis is right, and he's like, there's no other way to say it, that it is right. And so Man, it seems to me that Jordan Peterson is becoming more and more transparent with where he is in his Christian or religious walk. And I'm praying and hoping that he will come out and boldly proclaim that Jesus Christ is Lord and that people should follow him. And I think that would be so tremendous and amazing. But yeah, guys, keep praying for Jordan Peterson.